Well, good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the July 9th Technical Committee to order. Dallas, do we have a quorum here? Looks like we do this morning. Introductions. Let's start. Beth, we'll start with you this morning.
Beth Collins, Lenore City.
Laura Smith, East Tennessee Development District.
Dakota Gentry, City of Alcoa.
Dallas D. Armand, Knoxville, Knox County Planning.
James Temple, Sevier County.
Durand Hacker, Blount County.
Daryl Smith, Town of Farragut.
Amy Brooks, Knoxville, Knox County Planning.
Doug Burton, TPO Coordinator.
Jack Qualls, Loudoun County, City of Loudoun.
Catherine Baldwin, Anderson County.
Jim Snowden, Knox County Engineering Public Works.
Blake Sargent, Metro Knoxville Airport Authority.
I'm Tom Clayville with City of Knoxville.
I'm Pat Downs with Knoxville Area Transit.
Deanna Flincham, Tennessee Vans.
Michelle Christian, TPOt Office of Community Transportation. Karen Estes, Knox County CC Transit.
Patrick Berg, City of Oak Ridge.
Okay, thank you. We've also got one. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to take a real quick second. We actually have a new employee. I'll put him on the spot just for a second. Jonah Bird, go ahead and give us a wave. You can see him. He's been here about 3 weeks, and he has his master's from Appalachian State University. He is a native Tennessean, raised in Chattanooga. He also got his undergraduate degree from Vanderbilt, so he spent time in Nashville, and he's done some internships with TPOt Multimodal, so some of you may recognize him from there. And we're really excited to have him on board. He will be doing a lot of multimodal work, working on greenways, biking, and transit. So if you have a chance after the meeting, stop by and say hi to him.
Welcome. Glad to have you. Is there anyone participating on Zoom this morning?
We have Timothy from Stantec on Zoom. He'll be speaking later.
Okay, great. Amendments to the agenda. Has everyone had a chance to look at the agenda and have any amendments today? All right, seeing none, we'll move on. Gonna forego the list of acronyms. Item 2 on our agenda is the minutes. In your packet, you'll find our minutes from the May 14th Technical Committee meeting. Has everyone had a chance to review those? I need a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second? Discussion? All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion carries. Item number 3, FTA, Urban Transit Program of Projects.
All right, this will be me. This is our annual allocation that our urban area gets of the federal transit funds. We have to go through this program of projects every year. There's 3 different sets of funding that comes to us on an annual basis. One is the Federal Transit Administration Section 5307 Urban Area Funding. For fiscal year 24, we got $8.7 million, so we actually saw an increase of about $227,000. And this money can be used for transit capital and operating. The city of Knoxville is actually the designated recipient of these funds, but the federal rules requires this approval process go through the MPO process. They've been the recipient since the 70s, and some of you that have been around for a while may remember that in 2012, we began to divide the money between CAT, CAC, and ETHRA. We have an agreement between all the 3 providers about how the funding will be divided. It's based on a agreed upon percentage. So 79.8% goes to CAT, so that's around $6.9 million. 14.9% goes to CAC, that's $1.3 million. And ETHRA gets 5.3%, which is about $462,000. They have to publish so the public can see what their intention is to use the funding for, and it's done in very broad categories. But for CAT, they'll be using the money for maintenance, vehicle overhauls, support vehicles, ADA service. They're going to work on renovating the maintenance and transit facilities, some computer software, safety and security. And CAC and ETHRA kind of use it basically for the same thing: operating, job access, maintenance, and safety and security. The second source of funding that comes to our urban area every year is 5339, and it's called Bus and Bus Facilities Funding. And the annual allocation for '24 was $731,000 and some change there. We had a little bit of an increase of $25,000. And this can be used to purchase vehicles and equipment and for keeping up facilities. Once again, the city of Knoxville is the designated recipient. Now, this funding must go to a fixed route provider. So in our area, CAT is the only fixed route provider. So all this funding goes to CAT. And what they're designating this funding, and once again, this is in very broad categories, to buy a replacement service van, purchase bus stop shelters and signage, acquire shop equipment, and also some miscellaneous support equipment for their mobile fare collection. The third source of funding, this is the 5310. This is the funding that comes to us for seniors and people who are disabled, and we often award this to nonprofits to help them buy vans, or it also goes to like the CAC Volunteer Transportation Program or the Blount County Smiles Program. It's $831,000. We actually had a little bit of a decrease this year, and the FTA changes their formula. They tweak it every year, so you never know whether you're gonna get a little bit more or a little bit less. But we have to spend this on projects for seniors and people who are disabled. And it does specify like how much you have to spend on capital, which we use to buy vans, operating, and administration. And here the TPO is the recipient. And you have to be a nonprofit or a human service provider. We don't do a list of projects at this time. We do a separate call for projects in the fall. But this, like I said, for those of you all been around, this is where we award like vans to Sertoma, Emory Valley Center, Cerebral Palsy Center. So that will be coming in the fall, but we do approve this process as part of this program of projects. The last thing is we are required to do a formal public hearing, and we always incorporate this with the executive board. And if people are watching us out there on CTV, that's on July 24th. You can go and look at all the details of the program of projects online at our knoxtpo.org. You can either email or contact me, and I'm going to go ahead and, since some people may be watching this, it's at doug.burton@knoxtpo.org, or you can call me at 865-215-3824. And if you do have comments, you can email those in or send them in, but we have to have them the day before July 23rd, so those can be read into the record. And so, as I mentioned, we are required by the Federal Transit Administration to do a public hearing, and we always do that as incorporated as part of our executive board. So that is the presentation. I could take any questions or comments, and we do need a motion to recommend to move this forward to the executive board.
Okay, thank you, Doug. Is there any questions for Doug at this time? Okay, need a motion to recommend to the board?
Motion to recommend.
Need a second? Is there any more discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. Motion carries. Item number 4, TDOT funding proposal discussion related to FHWA August redistribution.
Yeah, I'll call Preston Elliott up. This is kind of an interesting situation that the state of Tennessee finds ourselves in, and they have a proposal for us that I think will help Knoxville and the whole state. And so I'm going to turn it over to Preston to give that presentation.
Thank you, Doug. Appreciate that. Will I be controlling the PowerPoint? Oh, from here? All right, excellent. Thank you. My name is Preston Elliott, Deputy Commissioner, Chief of Planning for TDOT. I appreciate the opportunity to present before you today. I have actually 2 items, this one here, but before I start, if it's okay, I'd like to introduce a couple folks. I know you're accustomed to seeing folks here in the region from TDOT, but today with me I have Steve Allen and Matt Meservey. And the reason why I want to mention both of them is because TDOT has been going through a reorganization, and as part of that reorganization, we're putting a greater emphasis not only on planning, but also our support to communities. Steve is the new Director of Local Programs and Community Development, or Community Investments. Steve has been with the department 47 years, a little while, right? Yeah. So he might know a thing or two about the department and things that relate to projects. But why this is important is because in your communities, as you know, locally managed projects, it's a very challenging process. And we recognize that there's a need to provide greater support, greater emphasis in our local programs component to advance the projects in your community. In addition to upstanding local programs as a division, we will also be backfilling that with engineers in our local programs division. So I think it's going to be very valuable to the work that we do with you to help advance your projects. And then Matt Meservy over planning. His role hasn't changed. He'll still be over planning. We have made a pretty big change, I think, that I hope that you all will find interesting and maybe a well-needed change. So our TIP and STIP development process, modifications, development, amendments, now those activities are going to be in the planning division. So we're combining the planning and programming component. Again, the goal here is to help advance your projects. The goal here is to be more supportive to communities and the use of federal funds. Now, that leads me to this discussion today. So thank you for allowing me to take a brief moment to introduce the two staff here. So I wanted to talk to you about a topic that's something that you've probably have heard or discussed before at the MPO level, and that is the federal funds that come through the MPO planning process to the state. So there are a variety of funding programs, the NHPP funds, which is the National Highway Performance Program, whether we're talking about the Surface Transportation Block Grants, so the STBG. There are actually 5 pots of STBG funds. You often probably encounter and work with the funds that pertain to the MPO. If you call them STBGM or L, sometimes MPOs even call them STBGU. Those are funds that are specifically identified in DC for urban areas over 200,000 in population. So the Knoxville TPO is over 200 in population. In Tennessee, we now have 5 MPOs that are over 200,000. It used to be 4. I used to say the big 4. Now I have to learn to teach myself to say the big 5. Clarksville is the one that has emerged as a result of the 2020 census. In Tennessee, that amount that comes to the big over 200,000 MPOs is about $68 million annually. That's roughly the amount that comes to Tennessee for our over 200,000 MPOs. And then that is distributed back down to the MPOs. So now I'm going to lose my spot here, but I'll come back to how much that rate translates, I think. 13? About 13 million, thank you. Great. About 13 million for your MPO. And you can see across the HSIP program, which is safety, CMAQ. So most of these, hopefully, there are probably acronyms that you have seen before. They're part of your TIP. So there's a certain amount of apportionment that a state that is determined at the national level for these various pots and total. And what ends up happening is that we don't really actually get all of the money that's available to us in the apportionment. What happens is annually Congress will determine the obligational authority or obligation limit that is allowed for each of these in total, but then there's a percentage that's based on how it funds down to the program. So this kind of depiction of the obligational authority or limitation that's available for us and then how it is distributed in the pots. And so in some cases you may have an ability to that it appears you could spend a much higher amount, but you really can't. And so you can quickly and easily see how dollars can get trapped because they have certain requirements. So let's say TAP, for example. TAP program or a CMAQ program has certain eligibility. As you're thinking about your project needs, it's not like you can say, oh, well, we'll just use the TAP funds and build this road. It doesn't, as you know, it doesn't work that way. They can only be used for a specific purpose. So unless a project has advanced and ready is to obligate those funds, it can't necessarily use them. So your obligational, your unobligated amount builds up. So let me try to explain this in a more simplistic way. So we're going to talk about fish ponds. So think about the ponds like the pots of different federal funding programs that are available. And you may see 16 fish in that pond, but the obligational authority that we're going to give you is you can only catch 10. And so what we confront with is that there's actually more authority there, but we can't tap into those. And so just envision this across the country, right? So this is what's occurring. And so, whether the other pot is STBG state or STBG urban. So kind of going back. So every year around August, well, it is August, it's called August redistribution. Essentially, the feds look at all of their federal programs, all of the states across the country to see how much they've obligated. And so they can basically provide additional obligational authority to states that can use those funds. And what does that mean? You have to have projects that can spend that money, be obligated by September 30th. And so we basically have the ability to ask for an additional obligational authority. And so let me just show a depiction of what that looks like. So again, we were at 15, so now we can go to 20, and so we can fish for a little bit more in the different ponds. And so just to kind of show you how that works, right? And then so basically what we're talking about is our ability, there are some funding programs where you can move some obligational authority around because there's funding flexibility. But in the end, what it boils down to is our ability to obligate additional projects utilizing these funds. So I want to show you what other states are doing. Just for awareness, the August redistribution nationally is $8.7 billion. 3 or 4 years ago, that number was about $4 billion. So it's exponentially been growing over the last several years. And so other states, so historically TDOT has, for Tennessee, has been able to annually get about $60 million. They ran 40 to 60 million. You can see the top here in the last several years, our performance in August redistribution. So it's basically having the ability to ask for additional obligational authority. Other states, very comparable in size in terms of how much they receive. So Tennessee gets about $1.2 billion annually in our apportionment of those federal programs I talked about. South Carolina and Kentucky about $1 billion each. North Carolina about 1.4, Virginia 1.4, and then Georgia 1.7. So when you look there, at least for the top 3 or 4, we're pretty comparable in the amount of apportionment we get. But you'll notice that these other states are bringing down a significantly higher amount of additional August redistribution. And so these states have been employing some strategies, and this is what Doug has kind of alluded to that we wanted to have a conversation with you all about, is that what we've observed in states like North Carolina is they've employed what's called a fund swap process, where the state makes available their flexible STBG funds in exchange for utilizing your unobligated funds. So basically a swapping of funds. So let me speak to this a little bit here, because it's pretty problematic for Tennessee. We actually have over $420 million of unobligated apportionment in the 4 urban areas. And you can see the amounts that there's about $34 million in Chattanooga, about $74 million here in Knoxville, $100 million in Memphis, and $208 million. That's about 6 years of apportionment. Remember when I spoke a little bit earlier about $68 million? So that's where that's about 6 years worth. And this is important, I think, to mention. We recognize that you have these funds programmed on projects. And when I spoke earlier about the local programs component, we recognize that there are challenges in getting through that process. And so we have upstood, and it's going to take us some time, but the goal here is to help advance your projects, to give you the support you need in moving through. And you can quickly see the fact that, while your projects are programmed, it will take quite some time to get through the execution of a contract, through the environmental process, design, right-of-way, and construction. And that could take 6 years in some cases the larger component of your projects really won't start to hit until you get into the right-of-way and construction. So even though you're starting on projects, they take a little longer to spend out over time, and we recognize that. So I mentioned about North Carolina, their strategy in terms of taking STBG Flex and doing that to obtain the higher levels. So our strategy, and we've had conversations with the TPO staff, the commissioner has, I think, participated in a couple of those Friday morning calls. We were almost on a 3-week streak, I think, but hopefully we won't have to do that. But we really, really appreciate your time to do that. So really our strategy here is first is to assist you in the projects that you have that you need to obligate. And because that helps our state when we reduce that that number, bringing that down. The second is to employ this kind of funding swap strategy. And this has been something, again, that's been done in other states. It's a 1-for-1 exchange. And so basically that there are very strong safeguards in place that pertain to this. So if we were to utilize your funds, your unobligated funds, we have to keep those funds in this urban area. We can't take monies and use it in Nashville or anywhere else. And I'll explain what I'm referring to there. And there's a couple strategies with that. But essentially, when you're ready for your phase of your project to obligate, we pay you back, we give you back our STBG Flex, because we can use the Flex funds anywhere in the state, whereas your dollars can only be used in your urban area. We've actually done this before. I think, was it 2013, I think, is for in the Knoxville TPO in the past. So the additional obligational authority, let me explain how this works. You've probably wondered when you've looked at your TIP is like, what is this AC? What is this STBG AC or NHPP AC? We have, and this is a strategy that's available to all state DOTs, and it basically signals to the feds that we intend to ask for federal funding back on a project, but we're advanced constructing. We are basically pre-financing. We're using state dollars with the notion of being repaid back of federal funds. And so the combination of swapping funds, AC conversion, which basically allows us to take a project that's already been advanced and constructed in your urban area, for example. Let's see here. Western Avenue? Yeah, and also I think State Route 115, the interchange at Tyson Boulevard. Yeah, AC funded, and it was about $143 million of AC funding. So what this also can do is, now not in this urban area, we're not experiencing this, but if we had projects that were ready at the state level, but we didn't have enough obligational authority, if we were using your funds, we could advance those projects. So in one urban area, we have 3 resurfacing projects. We don't have enough funds to do them for their urban area today, but if they give us access to their funds, the fund swap, we'll be able to let those projects this fiscal year instead of waiting till next fiscal year. So those are examples of where an August redistribution and funding can move projects a little bit further along. Let's see. So let me kind of get to the why. When you have, and again, I think you all have been very good in the programming and advancing your projects, but funds sitting on the sideline, it's not like wine. It doesn't get better with age. In fact, you're losing buying power. And so by advancing the project, and that's why we really want to help you all with your local program projects, is because a project is never going to be any cheaper than it is today. And so utilizing these funds today helps advance projects. It also ensures that we're not leaving monies on the table that other states are receiving. And then the last part I'd like to kind of leave you with is this, is that I mentioned to you about the $420 million just in the large 4 urban areas. We rank 4th in the country in terms of unobligated funds. We rank 1st as it relates to the percentage of STBG, but we're behind states like Texas, California, and Georgia in terms of how much monies that the feds are that's saying that we should be obligating. Our number statewide is 450 million, and again, we're of that 8.7 billion. It's about 5%. So why is this important? Two reasons to be thinking about this. As most of you are aware, there's a lot more discretionary grants that are available nationally. I think in Morristown and Lakeway was very successful in getting a grant which was 100% federally funded, no match requirement. And so as we look at things like the bridge, the pedestrian bridge that you all are trying to seek funding for, we're hearing that nationally it's hard for FHWA to say, how can we be giving you these discretionary grants when we look at and we see $400 to $500 million of unobligated? It appears like you have monies. So they're apples and oranges, but it's really kind of the things that we're hearing from FHWA in terms of when they look at the book, so to speak. And the other one is a really significant one, and I don't know, Doug, if you've all have had any conversations around this Delphi FEMAS issue. Probably not.
I think at one point we at least touched
Talked
on
about,
it briefly, but may have slid past. But.
Yeah, I'll just at a real high level. So when IIJA passed, the federal government, they did a reconciliation between Delphi, which is the federal government's accounting system, and the FEMAS is when your projects are ready to obligate. That's what Craig will get with our folks, and we'll get it into FEMAS, and then that's when it's considered obligated. There is I think at one point it was like $6 billion discrepancy nationally. They've got that down to about $1 billion. And if you recall me mentioning to you that we have a very high unobligated balance of unobligated funds, if they need to rectify the books, which they will, they're going to be looking to states that have high balances. So we're trying to safeguard ourselves against that risk factor by making sure that not only are we advancing projects, but we're kind of looking at the financial aspects and trying to make sure that we're being smart about the dollars that come to our state and trying to put them to use, and then create mechanisms and systems by which we can move the monies where they need to be when they need to be used. So it's really about a financial management kind of change in philosophy. I know I have thrown a lot at you. I think that what I'd like to leave you with is, and I know you'll have lots of questions, and that's good, is the fact that we know that we have the ability to convert dollars in your MPO area, but first we want to make sure we advance your projects. Then the flex component of the funds, or excuse me, the swapped funds, the most that we could do would be the 75 million, but we already talked about the AC funded ones, but I think you've identified about 20 or
close to
10,
24, and then
10 million, and yeah. So maybe Doug, I'll stop and let you all ask some questions.
Is there any questions? I'm sure everybody's got questions. Want to be the first? Hey, we're good.
I'll tell the commissioner I'll be very excited. Yeah.
I think I will just reiterate that we did do this in 2013 on a smaller scale. It was about 22 million, and it seemed to work. We did, as staff, have to, have a spreadsheet and kind of keep track of the payment. Unfortunately, at that time, there wasn't like a real big project, so they were paying us back in little increments as they were keeping projects going. But we were able to keep track, and we did get all of our funding back. So, so there is a little bit of a precedence here for that. So I'll put that out there.
And on that note, let me say, the several goals that we hope to achieve through this process, and I've mentioned to Craig some of this as an example, but we're not only looking at this as a financial management, but we want to make sure when we make these changes, we're doing it in the most efficient way. Our goal ultimately is an E-STIP that is capable of any of you to being able to see in real time not only where your project is on a funding level, but the repayment obligational back as well. working to make sure that we can be more efficient in whether we're talking about modifications or adjustments in the TIP process. We've had some really good dialogue with FHWA about how to do that. The goal would be here is to not turn this into an account, an administrative accounting exercise that is just too burdensome. We really want to do it in a way that's very efficient.
And I think we've also discussed that there would be some form of memorandum or something that would outline.
Absolutely, and yes. And I would hope that we can have that, a draft before you, before your board meeting. I was hoping that there's a letter coming to you from the commissioner. It'll probably arrive today, but the MOU, absolutely.
So Preston, do you see this as kind of the future for funding in the state going forward? Or is this more of a one-time kind of thing, or what are we thinking here?
No, very good question. I'm hoping that it plants the seed for as we look at the next TIP update, that we begin to think about things like, do we need to differentiate within the TIP page about STBG urban or STBS, and we may be able to call it STBG, and in the back of it, we track those dollars so that if there's more flexibility that occurs in some states, I'm not saying that we're there yet, but this could begin to plant the opportunity of thinking about the exchange in a way that some other states are, where they're doing federal for state dollars. I don't know if we have that ability yet, but you would say, well, why would you want to do that? Well, a large portion of why locally managed projects take so long is that federal requirement. If we can remove that, it could expedite the project process. Don't know if we're there yet, but that could be something that could come down in that exchange. There are about 16 states nationally that have some sort of swap program, whether it's like North Carolina's, where it's just a one-for-one on state STBG for urban STBG, versus other states where they'll do an exchange of federal for state.
The other thing, I kind of cheated and asked a few questions before everybody got here this morning, but my concern was more about rescinding funds from the feds. I know a lot of us around the table have lived through that in the past, and I think this kind of, by tying up this obligated fund, these non-obligated funds, it kind of protects us. Is that?
Absolutely, yeah. So, think about this in two regards. At the moment, I talked to you about the $420 million of the urban STBG. At some point, that number is going to become so large that the department can't even shield you. When you saw up top, and I told you about the apportionment, we're spending oldest money first. So we're spending the oldest apportionment first. Obligational first. If that number gets to 800 million, we wouldn't be able to shield that. So you literally would lose those funds, and it wouldn't even be a rescission. They would just lapse from the time. Now, the other part of that is something that you asked about, and again, the Delphi FEMAS issue, and then I think, Craig, I don't remember exactly when it was, but the CRISA funds that were part of during COVID. There were some funds that came in that were 100%. They had time limits on it, and I think within about a 3-day.
We managed to get all of those out the door.
Yeah, and it was like 3 days, I'm pretty sure.
Which speaks to what's available or what can happen when there's urgency.
That is true. Yes, it speaks to what can happen when there's urgency. Let's not create that kind of urgency. I think I was telling Doug or somebody, it's like, I've never seen Congress act so fast. Like they decided like on a Wednesday, the House or the Senate, and then, by that Saturday, the president had signed it, and anything left was rescinded. Thank goodness in Tennessee, working fast with your staff, across Tennessee, $14 million was protected. We had to do a lot of changes with those dollars. We converted them basically to FTA, but had we not, those would have been lost.
Is there any more? Yes, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Preston, for coming out. And these acronyms always you said there's the funding that would be AC. Is that what you said? What is that? Help me with that again, if you don't care.
Yes, let me see if I can go back. So, it's called advanced construction, so AC funding. So it's in federal law that allows for basically, so long as your project meets all of the federal requirements, you can spend state monies, and you're basically letting the feds know that we will be back to ask for reimbursement of those dollars. So it's a little bit of cash management that we do. So why, you may say, well, why would you do that? So if I go back to this one of these slides here, we'll just use this one here. If you notice, I kind of the third cylinder over, you'll notice that there's a portion is higher, you know, and I'm not even getting to the obligational limit. When you max out your obligational limit on one of those programs, we can't ask, there's nothing we can do. We can only spend up to that amount. And so if we've got a project that's ready for construction and we want to advance that to construction, like we did on the project we just talked about, we will use state funds with the notion that we're going to get paid back. And so it's basically a sort of like a cash flow management perspective that we do. Now, we're never going to be able to ask for reimbursement beyond our obligational limit. But in this case here, if you gave us access to it, we'll be able to do that. So that basically replenishes the kitty, so to speak. So what does that mean? It could mean that other projects in the 10-year plan over time could move faster, move quicker into the project development process, because then we now have access to cash funds back that we had advanced constructed.
Do we have a list of what those projects are?
Yes, and I don't know if we put it in your, there's,
Sent to us an email, so one is the I-640 repaving project that's been ongoing, and the other is
the interchange at Tyson Boulevard.
relocated Alcoa Highway.
Yeah, and so just to give you an idea,
Project's currently under construction with advanced construction state funding, and this would be then essentially paying those funds back to the state, obligating those funds, drawing down that statewide balance.
Right.
They would then have an agreement to repay us to future years for the projects as we manage them out through the process. And I'll step into here to say we look forward to working with local programs to improve the delivery process for all of our local partners, which I think is something that I want to emphasize is something we want to achieve through this, so that we're not building those balances back up and having this conversation
absolutely,
on an iterative basis every year.
absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I guess one of my last things is just thinking forward. TDOT has obviously taken into consideration that if things change on the national level politically, and there's cuts, as let's say the Republicans get, and they want to balance the budget, and they make deep cuts across all programs, and there's less federal money that will flow in future years, that you're going to be able to manage all this and not get caught short by kind of borrowing too much money, but then not have enough money to pay it back.
So let me speak to that. So one of the other things that we'd ask Craig is, what does 25 look like, fiscal year 25, in terms of repayment? We have a couple of more levers available to us than you at the MPO level or even municipal level as it relates to these federal funds. As you can see across the top, I mean, our NHPP fund program is over $500 million annually for the state. So it's a much more sizable amount. If you had a project that's in your TIP that on repayments that was on a eligible route, we could use NHPP funds if that became a problem. There are other programs that we can flex those funds back to STBG. We might just flex them to STBG anyhow, just so we don't have to go through a big TIP process. So there's a lot of things that we have that we can do. The other thing that we have at our ability to do, because we have a whole department that's specifically looking at transportation projects and moving these federal aid funded projects, is if we had to, worst case scenario, wait 1 or 2 lettings for one of the projects that we're managing, we have the ability to do that to allow for cash flow management. It's no different than the 3 resurfacing projects I gave you as an example. They're ready to be let. We don't have obligational authority in that particular urban area, so they will be let next year after October. So it's those types of things that allow us the ability to be a little bit more management of the, versus when you're thinking very individual project. So yeah.
Any more questions? Preston? All right. I guess I need a motion to recommend approval of this onto the executive board.
Motion to approve.
Need a second. Is there any discussion? All right, seeing none, let's take a vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Seeing none, motion carries.
We greatly appreciate the partnership.
Sir, appreciate TDOT and everything y'all do for us. Number 5, TDOT State Partnership Program.
So I don't think I'm out of the hot seat yet. Let's see, sorry. Yeah, sorry about that, Doug. All right. Well, we're here again. So real excited about another opportunity. And I think all of you last year, when the TMA passed, we set in a motion to develop a 10-year plan for how we look at transportation projects. We had the luxury and opportunity of a $3.3 billion infusion that allowed us to take a holistic look, not only our normal $1.2 billion federal funds, but the $3 billion for the TMA. Part of that process, we initiated what we call the statewide partnership, an SPP, and it was our attempt to essentially say, hey, we know that you all are working on projects. You've got projects that are committed with local funds or MPO funds, and we'd like to partner with you to help advance those projects. We learned a lot through that process. We learned that there's about $2.7 billion of need across the state, just looking at about 66 projects. There was about $300 million that folks are using either locally, private, or with MPO funding. Again, the problem is that there was $2.7 billion in ask. We only had $3 billion statewide for the TMA, but nonetheless, the 10-year plan that we have here that was put into motion last December outlines the projects and our philosophy of what gets started gets finished. And what we mean by that is that historically, what the department would do is put enough money on a project to get it started. And then, as the project advances, find the money for the next phase, find the money for the next phase. The 10-year plan has a completely different philosophy. If we start it, we're going to finish it, and that means that we have to have the monies to do it. So in the 10-year plan, you see that it's fiscally constrained. It's not only fiscally constrained using the TMA funds, the state funds, but it's also fiscally constrained using our federal apportionment or obligation that we showed you, that 1.2, those different funds. So why is this important is that when you start to do that, the math needs to be really good, because it's not that you're just starting something and inching it along. You need to see it through fruition. We also have this philosophy of a team-based approach on project delivery. Prior to this philosophy, we were delivering about 50% of the projects that we would say that we would in a fiscal year. We're now hitting between 80 and 90%. Again, when you start to deliver on 80 to 90%, that means that the monies that might have been available for others, we just can't promise it. So we've instituted this process of the SPP for 2 purposes. One is if there are projects in your MPO area, there are projects locally that you're using STBG funds or some other funding that you would like the department to partner with you on. This is our open enrollment, so to speak. We're trying to institute a process that is very supportive of the MPO process, your planning process, the deliberate process that you're going through as you evaluate projects. We're trying to do that similarly, where we say, hey, cities, counties, MPO, RPOs, tell us what projects that you are looking to advance in the next 10 years that you've already committed to. So this is very similar to what we did last year. You should have a front and back piece of paper to you on our statewide partnership program. The second part of that is we're also trying to convey to the legislature what is the need in the next 10 years where communities have already committed to projects that need funding. And so we anticipate not only trying to evaluate what projects we can add into the 10-year plan or what projects that we could advance from an outer fiscal year up sooner, but also to have an understanding across the state about what that need is, that $2.7 billion as an example that I mentioned to you. So you'll see that there's a lot of frequently asked questions on the backside of this document that outlines our objectives and goals. Again, this SPP is largely around the highway side of things. As most of you know, we have other programs for transit, for multimodal access, TAP, we have aviation. So we have a lot of grant programs that are multimodal in nature. So this is primarily on the highway side. We do envision at some point in time that we're able to look at all of those other grant programs that we have and maybe do it in some sort of bundle so that we can do a similar call rather than you going after TAP funds here, MMAG funds here, improve capital transit here. Maybe in the future we might be able to consolidate them. Those are things that Steve and I are talking about as it relates to his new division. But what you have in front of you is we just launched this yesterday evening. And so there's a QR code on here, and I think we're hoping that through the MPO plan process that will help to support advanced projects that you have here within your region. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I need to. So if you submitted something last year and it's not in the 10-year plan, submit it again because we need to know. Obviously, things change, projects advance. You may have expended more funds. We may have gotten additional commitments. Would encourage you that projects that are in your TIP that you have STBG funds on are probably great candidates because it illustrates you've already committed funds to it. What does that mean if you had, let's say, a project in your TIP that you've already have identified in that outer year, even for construction, and you want to get statewide partnership funds? What that might mean is that locally within the MPO, you could take that freed up STBG funds and then reprioritize for a project that you may be wanting to initiate that may not be far enough along or you're waiting for some funds to free up so that you can move forward. So really it's intended to let you all do what you do at the regional level with your funds, but this is really to help us figure out what you might be counting on or thinking about at the state level. I've said again a lot. I guess if there's questions on the statewide partnership program.
Anyone with questions? Doug? All right, seeing none, I think we're good on that one.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it.
Mr. Conger's coming to the stand.
Hi there. So I'm going to do a quick introduction for this next item, which is just for your information, quick update on the Mobility Plan 2050. We have Timothy Tressa-Levy on Zoom, and let's do a quick sound check, make sure he can speak to us.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear. All right, so Doug has the clicker. If you want to just, we have your slides pulled up here. If you want to just let us know when to move to the next one, I'll turn it over to you.
Excellent. Appreciate it. And I'm here taking notes, so if I start typing something, that's what I'm trying to do. Just want to give you a brief update here. I know we've got other meetings and items here going on the agenda, so let's pop to the next slide. Just kind of get an update of the schedule, talk about what we're working on right now, and then more importantly, what we're working towards upcoming, and that's where you guys come in. So item 3, and then review the action items number 4. So next slide. We're kind of just past the halfway point, I'd like to say. There's a lot of items checked off the list in the early going. I think right now our focus is on the new project needs. Appreciate the effort that went into the last month kind of reviewing previous projects. We're on that next kind of half phase of that. And then immediately after that piece, we're talking about the travel demand model, looking at deficiencies in the base year and future year, finalizing your project list tables and maps, which goes really well with the conversation we're having here about funding and state partnership programs. And then that'll lead us into the kind of the second round of engagement, hopefully this fall, and then getting things buttoned up on this MTP process. So that's kind of where we stand, big picture. Next slide. Just want to go over a couple items that we reviewed at last month's meeting. I believe we talked about outreach to date and showed some metrics and photos. Just a reminder there on the right. We talked about some key takeaways of engagement and threw a couple of those out there as well. And we started this review of 2045 projects. We gave you two different formats, the Excel table, wonderful and exciting if you love Excel, and then the ArcGIS online format as well, and that link was available too for review. Next slide. In honor of the Paris Olympics this month, I want to give the gold medal to the 6 jurisdictions that submitted kind of their audit from the spreadsheet. We reviewed 160 total projects. A large chunk of them were either dropped, removed, just kind of changed around. A few of them were completed to date, and so those came off the list as well, and then modified an additional 9 projects. In total, 20% of that list changed somehow. That's just a good number and metric. We had a few new projects identified, but really we're at that point of adding more to the new project list from 2045. So that's kind of where we stand. Quick summary of what has changed, and thank you very much to the award gold medal recipients there. Next slide. So if we want to look at upcoming kind of tasks, next slide, there we go. We gotta kind of really want to work backwards from adoption. And so if we're looking for federal requirements in the May timeline for adoption of air quality, we're kind of looking at the April technical committee for adoption of the MTP, which means 30 days before that it's out for public review, which means a few weeks before that it's at FHWA review with edits, and then TDOT review prior to that, kind of somewhere around the new year. So all that to say that in the next 5 months, we are going to move a lot and put a lot on paper. So if we're looking at a draft MTP around the holidays, we need that final list of projects the month before. We need to have our second round of outreach in the October timeline. We need to be prioritizing projects in the September or late August timeline, which means we need our funding projections kind of buttoned up a little bit. We need our cost estimates for new projects, which means we need to really get to those listing of new projects in July and August. So all that to say, we're working backwards from 6 fixed deadlines. We've got some movement and some action this fall. So raise your hand if you're super excited, and I see nothing but raised hands, so excellent. Next slide. So here's what we're working towards more specifically. Next slide. This MTP update and the what is now called the Statewide Partnership Program, call for projects, quote unquote, generically speaking. What we want to do is get a better understanding of your new project descriptions, corridors from here to where, what types of improvements. Want to have our purpose kind of identify what's the deficiency we're really getting at from a planning level. And then what's the value? How does this align with our MTP 8 goals? And I just wanted to pause and note that as a planner, I care a lot about time and effort. And so I put together a little graphic that kind of speaks to, we're trying to find the minimum amount of time and the minimum amount of effort to get the ball rolling on these. We're certainly not trying to extend into the maximizing our time and maximizing our effort for engineering level analysis. And then we're certainly not getting towards construction. That's for later on down the line. So planning is that kind of much quicker, much lighter, much more flexible. And so just a reminder that we're kind of at the beginning of that curve. And so that's the kind of types of broad brush strokes that we're sort of looking for to go on this call for projects information. We're then going to apply the future revenue projections to that and get our better list of committed projects, 2030, 2040, and 2050 funded projects with some midpoints in between. Next slide. So we're going to put together something that's relatively familiar, a standard fillable form. It's still under development at this point. We're going to either launch a Microsoft Word format because it is quick and easy to fill in, but there might also be a PDF format version as well. The thinking there is I feel like everybody has Microsoft Word installed, but not everybody has the same level of PDF, and so sometimes it's a little clunky. So between the two options, you'll have the ability to kind of fill in this basic context of background of projects, the purpose, the value, and then any other partnerships and context you want to provide. So want to be able to cover those things, but again, at a planning level, more of like a screening level analysis, not at a full project engineering design kind of level just yet, right? Next slide. trying to move through these quickly because I know you got other items on the agenda. Upcoming work, next slide. So to go with that concurrently, Stantec and the TPO kind of helping with Caliper on the travel demand model, looking at the base year network, the future network, identifying more of those deficiencies locally with our new projections, which we presented in a previous technical committee meeting, populations and employment. Prioritizing projects will be kind of that objective or data-driven process of our goals. So whether they relate to safety, congestion, maintenance, economy, health, equity, preservation, or mode choice, and trying to get an initial priority score and ranking. And then we can kind of modify the project list and rankings from there to fit the right horizon years. We'll be projecting those project costs at planning level or unit costs. So any existing project that has a cost associated, we will project it up to current year. Any new projects will have to kind of use the same kind of planning level unit costs per mile or per intersection to get those up to speed and on the same kind of planning level estimate. Then we'll be applying our fiscal constraints and seeking the potential screening for potential impact to vulnerable populations and the environment. That's kind of one of those last pieces of the final project list. So a lot more to come, but getting these projects, new projects identified in our process earlier and often kind of helps us move forward on the MTP. It will also help you in your SPP process later on in the end of August. So I think we're doing this concurrently, and they're going to help each other be more efficient over time. So that's the good news. Next slide, if you don't mind. And we're on to, so what, Timothy? What are our action items? Next slide. So you should be really working for your new projects identified, whether they're roadway or freight projects, whether they're multimodal bike projects, whether they are transit projects, and think of them in those three buckets. What sort of local policy changes? Because sometimes policy, it's what helps you reprioritize what's important to your community. So 3 examples. Have you been talking about access management and corridors lately? Have you talking about retrofitting streets to be more complete in certain districts? Are you talking more about safety, your high injury network, and reducing crashes or traffic calming and speeds? Maybe those sort of policy changes can impact these projects, these project types, these project outcomes. We'd love to hear about those, so it's time to kind of write them down and share them as long when you fill out those call for projects. And then your outreach round number 2, think about additional venues you want to hit this fall to kind of bring this to the people. We had some great success doing 1 virtual and 2 in person in different geographies. Maybe for this second round, we rotate to even more different geographies and think about other ways to get people involved. So please help support us on that, and think about some new locations in your communities where we can kind of get the word out and gather feedback. In the meantime, Stantec and our team will be working for the performance reviews, PM 1, 2, and 3. We've got that kind of halfway in the can, just kind of want to make sure we're ironing out some of the details before we share that along. We want to finalize our revenue projections with Craig and the TPO, and then fold in some of those outputs from the regional travel demand model. So that's what we're working towards. That's what you guys are working towards. And remember our schedule, we've kind of got this late summer, fall, and very early winter deadline to get these really on paper and really ironed out in greater detail. So that's what I had to kind of update the team on and what we're working towards. I appreciate the opportunity to kind of bring that to you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, comments?
I just wanted to follow up real quick on what Timothy was saying in regards to that existing project review. I've talked to all the jurisdictions. We did have those that formally submitted information, but in addition to those, I had an actual in-person meeting with City of Loudoun and Lenore City a couple weeks ago that was productive on that, and happy to come out to other folks. I know I've talked to Catherine, and we need to engage with you guys more on a one-to-one level, verify your projects that are already in the plan and talk about other needs. And so I and other staff will be coming out over the next couple weeks as this really ramps up to, as Timothy mentioned, with our schedule there. So we'll be coming out and engaging with you guys on those. And one other thing, so this TPOt statewide partnership program, we literally just found out about it last night, this release and what the schedule timeframe will be. It's going to be a little bit of a challenge to marry that together with our process because we have deadlines that will probably come sooner than when TDOT will make their official project selections from that. So how we fold that into our assumptions for revenues and financial constraint are going to be tricky, to say the least. We'll have to manage that and figure out how we handle it, assume a project that's applied for an SPP, whether or not it would be awarded state funds or not, we'll need to figure out. So we'll have further discussions with TDOT about their schedule and how we can marry that together with ours and go forward from there. But we'll obviously keep you guys up to date as future meetings occur and so forth. So, but if there's any other questions, we can answer.
Okay, thank you. Item number 7, Norris Freeway Corridor Management Plan, TDOT staff. Oh, excuse me, Michael McCannon with TDOT staff.
Yeah, good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
And do I have the ability to share my screen?
Yes, just give me 1 second.
Okay.
How do I get that to expand? I guess I have to stop. Okay, you should be able to go ahead and share your screen now.
Share my screen. And I'm going to pull this.
Yes, we can see it. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let me get this started. And yeah, you guys should be seeing a picture of Norris Dam.
We're seeing it on the presenter view.
Okay. Let me. All right. Is this a better share? Have you got full screen now?
Yes, now it's full screen.
Excellent. All right. So thank you for having me this morning, and good morning to everyone in the room. My boss's boss is in the room as well. So if you like what you hear, tell them at the end. And also, good morning, Preston. But I just wanted to give you an update real quick on something that we had been working with really several local communities to the north and west of Knox County. Probably about 10 months between when we got started last summer, we worked through the fall, and then kind of wrapped up this spring. There's a just a real basic concept that some roads have an intrinsic quality about them that is scenic, and so as certain roads developed during the turn of the century, as the nation's transportation network grew, there were formal designations that were added at the state level and then at the federal level for scenic byways, literally scenic drives to different places. And there are collections of scenic byways that exist at that state and the federal level. At the federal level, there's a program that began in the 90s called the National Scenic Byway Program. Their collection of byways is called America's Byways, which is that little, blue pennant-looking road logo down at the bottom right. There are several of these America's Byways signs that are on routes in East Tennessee, specifically in East Tennessee. And then there are also, byways that exist at the state level that maybe they have a state level designation, or in other states, and then with us, maybe they've got Tennessee Parkway or Scenic Highway designation, which is our 2 state designations. If you've seen the green and white mockingbird signs, those are the state level designations for our state. And so what I'm showing you is a map of Tennessee's scenic byway collection. There are 13 routes that spread across the state. I think the majority of these routes cluster east, but we certainly have a lot of national designations. There are 10 uh, scenic byways of the 13 routes that are highlighted that have a national designation, whether they're national scenic byways or whether they're considered all-American roads. And when we're talking about the national collection, it's literally the roads that you think of America, you just think about the Pacific Coast Highway or Route 66 or 30A, or the George Washington Parkway or the road that connects, Lexington and Concord. It's the stuff that, comes up as you read about American history, as you travel places, these iconic roads. And certainly we have those in this state. So real quickly, there was a set of designations that came out of an act of Congress in 2020. The act was signed into law in 2020. There was a formal designation period that occurred in 2021. And the city of Norris approached TDOT and the Federal Highway Administration about getting a designation. Several of these routes, we had worked with communities, we had worked with local nonprofits and different groups for decades before they were designated. But Norris, we had no history of working with, but we actually worked with the group and got a federal level designation for the Norris Freeway in 2021, and which is the reason why we're here and why I wanted to bring this to you. The Norris Freeway, and I do want to read this because I think it adds context to what the route actually is. But the Norris Freeway National Scenic Byway was originally built in 1934 as a supply route to the Norris Dam, Tennessee Valley Authority's first hydroelectric project. The route was Tennessee's first limited access freeway, and structures along the route were built using a cohesive Art Moderne design. Kind of interesting. The route itself is a winding wooded road through lush countryside and waterways, which boasts some of the best trout fishing in the state. Today, the area is home to the town of Norris and Norris Dam State Park, as well as prominent hiking and horseback riding trails. We had worked with the town of Norris in getting their federal designation. Part of the national program is that you have to have an underpinning planning document for the route in order to obtain designation. The town of Norris and really a couple of folks on the planning commission drove this, and this was during COVID, so I felt like it made the it made the task even harder in some ways. But Michael Carberry with the Town of Norris Planning Commission and Scott Hackler, their city manager, were keen on having US 441, the Norris Freeway, the gateway into Norris, to be a national scenic byway. They adopted a corridor management plan on their own, which covered extensive parts of history and parts of recreational aspects for the route. So I just want to show you that document is to the left. It exists on our TDOT website. We have worked with the group and with the town and with Anderson County Tourism specifically on a couple other things that have gone on along the route. There's a website now that kind of directs travelers along the Norris Freeway, directs them along the route, and points out highlights. That's URL is in the middle of the page. This link to this exists on the state scenic byway website. And then to the right, we have a small call for projects. We call it Love TN Byways every year, where we have these scenic areas of the states. We have these scenic routes, and they need a little bit of beautification. They need a little bit of love. So we make a $9,500 amount of money available to them for beautification projects of their choice, so long as they pick up litter along the route. This is Julie Graham, who's a regional tourism director for the area. Many of you may know Julie, but there she is picking up litter on shoreline of Norris Lake, and they used their $9,500 to do some landscape screening between the actual road, between the Norris Freeway and I think it was a convenience center for Norris. So they had some landscaping that they did with their project. They've been active, and TDOT has been working hand in hand. Excuse me. We've been working hand in hand with them ever since they earned their federal designation in 2021. One of the things that we wanted to do, and we're doing this, we've done this with the Cherahela Skyway. A couple months ago, I had presented a final version of that plan to a different RPO. But these corridor management plans, many of them, I told you, TDOT had been working with communities for decades, talking about, some of these plans and awaiting for federal designation. And then, they've been designated and the plans needed updating. There are some things that we wish we had when we're connecting scenic byways to grant opportunities that didn't exist 20 years ago. Most of these plans that we have that are aged, they don't have any mention of electronic resources. So there's no talk about websites or mobile apps or any of the electronic ways you can interpret. There's no talk about tour buses. There's no talk about EV charging stations. There's no talk about a wide variety of topics. So essentially, we're in the process of updating several corridor management plans. Now, the document and the designation for the Norris Freeway is pretty recent, but there's still some things that we missed. This map, I want to show you, this map has, this is from the original document, but it is spelling out the route. I hope it's noticeable on it. I say Norris and we talk about the Norris Freeway and you're thinking, gosh, that's Anderson County. Gosh, that's, another jurisdiction. It's not us. But it does a full third of the route, 7 to 8 miles of the route does connect along US 441 there. And it stops at Tennessee 33. Essentially if you know the area, there's an Aldi and I think an Ingles shopping center at Tennessee 33. That's right there in Hall's Crossroads, and so it ends in Hall's Crossroads. So this is something that is definitely important to the other RPO, the East Tennessee North RPO that I presented to, and those communities. But it's also a gateway into Hall's Crossroads and something that involves this group. A couple things that we did with this, we had some better mapping that we did when we went through with the update. We did a lot of, they were designated off of their recreational qualities. So we did a lot of mapping of where those qualities were along the route. We did a couple land use things, but we had better mapping that appears throughout the updated document. We also took a look at roadside vegetation. If we ever, and it played out specifically with this group because this route they are definitely interested in roadside landscaping a little bit more than some of the others. But we wanted to have an inventory of what we saw when we visited the road and what appeared on roadsides. If we wanted to, do additional landscape plantings, what would it look like? And these are some of the species that we found along the roadsides. Additionally, we mapped out bike routes. I told you the designating quality was for recreation, which is federally defined, but there was a lot of talk about it in their initial application to get designated. There was a lot of talk about it in the corridor management plan that was 2021 from the original document, but we didn't have a lot of mapping and we didn't have a lot of regional mapping. So we outlined a lot of that. This is a picture of bike routes in the area. And also, EV charging opportunities. At some point, if Tennessee wants to follow other states and have kind of a policy where we have these scenic roads, these scenic designations, and we want to have an EV charging station every so many miles, it's helpful for us to know where things are initially along the route. And so we took a look at what was in the area. We saw what was available at the state park and some of the marinas otherwise, but we did not have that prior to, and we have it now. The thing that's probably the most important for TDOT is to have kind of a prioritized list of projects that are important to the route. We had an initial stakeholder meeting last summer. We did a lot of digging on the initial document. We pulled in some other outside resources, beefed up the mapping, and then had findings from all of that that we were able to get final input in a final stakeholder meeting to get them to tell us what was most important, and there was a ranking process, but these were the 7 things. So after they were designated, the town of Norris didn't want to be the sole byway management lead. They wanted to find and strengthen, add capacity for a byway management organization. That has occurred. Prior to, our working this plan, we had been working with Anderson County Tourism on making sure that if there's federal funding opportunities, if there's other resources like Love TN Byways that we were getting out, that they would make all the partners aware. Well, now we have a separate group that is doing that, and so they are in place. They adopted the group. I'll mention them in a second. They were very interested in visual wayfinding and interpretation. They wanted people to know that they were on a national scenic byway and that the route was special. They were interested in doing some external marketing and branding, specifically for outdoor recreation. I mentioned it a couple times that it was their quality, but their initial document talked a lot about history. It definitely mentioned recreation, but there was an additional inventory that we had to get done of recreation assets. And they want to take, that inventory and market it. They wanted some print collateral. They wanted what was, I thought, a really innovative idea in having a mobile visitor center rather than having a brick and mortar. I'll show you a picture of that in a second. And then some conservation management of view sheds. I mentioned earlier the landscaping that they wanted to screen things from the roadway. And then also, I showed you the map, and they're just one route that's in kind of a sea of scenic routes in East Tennessee, Western North Carolina, even connecting up to Kentucky. There's a lot of really great scenic driving that occurs in this part of the state, and they wanted to connect to it. So those were the 7 things that they identified in a work plan for us. And of course, they are prioritized in that order. Just interpretive, in Knox County and Halls Crossroads, there's a really nice public park that has a walking area called Clayton Park. I'm sure y'all are familiar with it, but they had talked about having interpretive panels added, maybe some signage in the parking lot, that sort of thing, because the park does exist specifically along the route. I think you can kind of almost see it on the map there, but those were the is it 7 or 8 areas that they identified for additional interpretation. Wayfinding, of course, TDOT is working on some roadside signage, and they had, worked up some concepts in the corridor management plan update, and those are on the left. They also thought it would be kind of an interesting idea if they got local businesses to put something in their window, like a sticker campaign that looks something like the right. So you can, again, you can grab a bite to eat, or you can, stop for a gallon of gas and understand that you're on the scenic byway. Vegetative screenings. These were the 4 areas that they called on. The outdoor storage yard and halls is the bottom right. They did want to put some sort of screening between the roadway and that business, to make it look a little bit better from the road. They had talked about that. This is a map with other byway corridors in the area, and it did include North Carolina and Kentucky. You can kind of see the routes that are multi-state. So this document will live on the TDOT Scenic Byway website along with the original document. We have gone through a series of local approvals, which these planning documents, there's not much in our Federal Register that guides what has to be approved, just that it's approved by a local byway management group. That group is the Norris Lake project. That's the new one that's taking over ownership of the route. So we had met with those folks. They had approved it on May 10th. We had kind of an extensive talk with the city of Norris because they are the one jurisdiction that, the road in and the road out is US 441 for Norris. So it is their major gateway. Their city council looked at it and gave it an approval in May. As well as I presented something similar to the East Tennessee North RPO. Their planning commission, who approved and worked on the initial document, approved it June 3rd, and then I'm here with you guys today. So these are a list of people that have either signed off on the plan or have I've been made aware that it exists, that the scenic byway designation exists for this area. That's really all I've got. I definitely want to entertain any questions and just mention, I'm in highway beautification at TDOT. We spend all of our time working on projects that involve litter prevention, scenic roadways, and landscaping. These logos to the right are our program portfolio. So we're definitely invested. Hopefully you've heard of us in some of our other areas. But I definitely appreciate the time, and if there's any other comments that you might have, I'd love to take them.
Any questions for Michael? Oh, go ahead. We have one here.
Catherine Baldwin. I am the planner for Norris. And on June 3rd, when the Planning Commission approved it, they did have a list of corrections. I just wanted to make you aware of that in case no one from the city had communicated that. I should tell you also that on July 3rd, we had a request for a very broad-based commercial zone designation that fronts on the Norris Freeway. The Planning Commission denied it. It's going to the City Council later this month, and we fully expect a challenge to that. The main reason that the Planning Commission denied the request for the commercial zone designation was the designation of the scenic byway. And I'm sorry to say we do expect a challenge to that. And TDOT, this designation, and maybe TDOT might be called to defend the city in that denial. But the city's very excited about it, and I appreciate all your work.
Yeah, it had been a lot of hours on the phone. I remember we couldn't go out anywhere, but I spent hours on the phone with Michael Carberry back.
Yes, and Michael's the one that has a list of corrections.
Okay, well, I'll definitely. I'm pretty sure we have those already.
Okay.
But I'll definitely circle back with Michael and make sure that we've got those in the final version. I also take a series of meeting minutes and put it as an appendix to the plan. So when we publish, it'll have today's meeting minutes and that sort of thing too. So we'll make sure we get all that in there. Thanks for mentioning that.
Thank you.
Michael, just real quick, this is Doug, the TPO coordinator. You had us on the list of approvals. Do you need something from the TPO, or is that just documenting that you made the presentation here?
Is documenting that I made the presentation. Yeah, I don't need an approval from the TPO. We have I've made it kind of our policy that as we update these plans, they have to be locally approved. But I want to make sure that the MPOs, the RPOs, that they are in the loop that this exists. So we're definitely taking them all, but I don't need an action item on this.
Okay, thank you. Anything else for Michael? Jack apologizes. He had to step away. If everyone's okay, I'll just run through the last few items. All right, so, well,
I'm going to stop my share and then I'm going to log out. Thank you all very much.
thanks again. Number 8 is TDOT and FHWA updates. I don't know if there's anything else from TDOT or, Michelle.
Yeah, sorry, I know you guys have heard from TDOT so much today, you're probably ready to no longer hear from TDOT. I do have one quick update from our transit staff. They are letting us know that the improved notice of intent phase closed on July 1st. That's for some transit projects. They are reviewing the proposals over the next several weeks, and they're anticipating to send out invitations to apply in early August. So for our transit folks who may have applied for that, just be on the lookout for those invitations. And I know earlier we introduced a number of staff from our headquarters office. We also have some folks here from the region. Steve, would you like to introduce yourself and your staff, just so everybody knows who you are, in case they haven't seen your faces?
I'm Steve Ward, Regional 1 Director. Most of you I know pretty well. A few of you, some new faces, some folks I met on the way in, talked a little bit in the elevator. Got Christy Brown with me. She's my Director of Project Development Pre-Construction. Gotta get that right. Dexter Justice is with Project Management. I know you're not. You're talking.
That's all. Thank you.
Okay, I don't think anyone from FHWA has joined us late or anything. All right, under other business, our executive board is on Wednesday, July 24th. Now, our next technical committee, I did want to point out, we're going to have this a week early on August 6th. The next week is the statewide MPO conference, so it's really important that all of our staff goes to that. And we'll send you out a couple reminders, so it's just 1 week early. It'll still be on Tuesday at 9 a.m. The only other thing, Ann Wallace, I think she had to leave. If you remember, she's with WSP. She had sent out a connected and autonomous vehicle survey. I don't think she got a very great response. So if you can remember, go back and try to do that survey. That's all of the other business I have. Item 10 is public comment. Is there anyone here from the public who wish to speak? All right, seeing no one, I guess we're open for a motion for adjournment. Second? Second. All right, thank you very much. I know we kind of spoiled y'all there for a few meetings where it was real quick, but so we really appreciate you hanging with us for this one. Thank you.